Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude BeyondMystic, and welcome to this episode of A Break in the Clouds with Penny Kelly. You can find her work at consciousnessonfire.com and also here at Penny Kelly on YouTube and on her Patreon at patreon.com/Penny Kelly. Let's give her a big warm welcome back to the show. Penny, how are you?
I'm good. I'm very good. I hope you are too. I hope everybody out there is great.
Thank you so much. I'm doing well, but crazy times indeed. I was telling in Silbretta in my previous interview tonight, this morning when I walked out of the house to go to the post office, I was walking to my truck and I realized my truck looks different. I'm like, oh, my sunroof is still open. It rained in my truck last night. I forgot to close the sunroof. So it's one of those weeks where there's so many things going on. Man, you know, it's just a little bit crazy.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And that's really kind of symbolic. It's raining on a lot of people and their innards, their insides. So.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. I know we're starting a little bit late here. We were trying to get all our ducks in a row before we started the episode. So thank you so much, everyone, for waiting. It is what it is. We do these episodes out of the goodness of our hearts, folks. And sometimes, life gets in the way. So we do apologize for being late. But it is what it is. All right, Penny, people are so excited here. To get into the latest look-see, what's the data showing right now? Everybody's worried. Like the energies are very, very frantic. In the last week, we're getting all of these emails, and in my shows during the live streams, people are just feeling this frantic energy, not just from the Schumann resonance and the energies from space, but apparently from the collective as well. All humans are jittery right now, and we're wondering if all of this is actually going where we see it's going, or if there's going to be a reversal at one point, and there's all these deadlines that these government officials has put across the world here, and everybody's just like, what's going on? So I'm going to give you the floor here to perhaps give a few scenarios that came out of your just fresh look-see, and then we'll start the conversation after that, okay?
Okay. Yeah, I did the look-see early this month because there was so much information out there, and I really had difficulty staying on track. And then it all changed, and what kept coming through were these 4 scenarios. And so finally, I just wrote those down, and I can go through those just kind of briefly. And I'll even say at the end which one I was hoping for, but which one I think is going to happen. So the first scenario was it was kind of the ideal, maybe. Donald Trump is announced as president. Trump steps back into the limelight and the power seat. The election audits come out and they say what we all think is true. In the future, elections are secure and Dominion voting machines are out. There's a restoration of the rule of law, which we need severely. The courts return to fairness and justice. The financial system rights itself. Masks and social distancing and vaccines go away. Regeneron, hydroxychloroquine, and ivermectin come into full use, and the whole COVID thing goes away. People take responsibility for their health. Mainstream media starts telling the truth and presenting both sides of issues, kind of a more balanced point of view. Lawsuits break up Google, Facebook, Amazon, and Big Pharma. Children are safe from kidnapping and torture. Education goes back to normal, and children are allowed to play outside like kids used to. Now they're really not. Human slavery and sex trafficking end or are greatly reduced. I was trying to see that absolutely gone, just never really goes away forever, completely. Police are reinstalled to keep peace in a lot of places. New forms of energy and technology appear. The swamp is drained and corruption comes to an end. Some people are lost, but many people begin to recover. And part of the reason for that is because they're excited about life and they're hopeful. People are happy or at least satisfied. So that was scenario number 1. Scenario number 2 was a little bit different. Donald Trump is announced as president. He steps back into power. Rule of law makes a partial comeback, but is still weighted heavily toward business.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard for people to get justice when they're up against the corporations. The court system is very uneven, and some districts and jurisdictions are unfair. And they are now, and it's grossly obvious that,
Right.
some places you cannot win. The other guy, the bad guy, is always going to win. Election audits come out, reports come out and say what we all think is true. Some states, not all, only some, institute new forms of voting that do not involve voting machines. Some went back to paper, some got some other kind of machine. Let's see. In other states, Dominion voting machines are replaced by similar machines made by someone else. A new gold-backed financial system is announced, which I didn't think was going to survive, but it was announced.
Can I pause you right there?
Yeah.
What did you see for the financial system in scenario 1? If you said it, I don't remember you saying it here. I just wanted to write it down.
It righted itself.
Righted itself. Okay.
Got back on track.
Okay. Yeah, keep going.
Okay. Masks, social distancing, and vaccines still demanded in some places. I was not happy about that.
Right.
Coronavirus variants continue to appear. I was not happy about that. Remdesivir and ventilators remain the go-to treatment for those in hospital.
Okay.
Regeneron, hydroxychloroquine, and ivermectin are not available everywhere, and in some places you couldn't get them at all. Mainstream media continues their propaganda efforts to control the narrative, and they were quite successful with that. Many critically important pieces of news are just omitted or ignored. Google, Facebook, Amazon, Big Pharma, and Big Tech get bigger. I was not happy about that. Alternative media completely wiped out. There's no way to have an alternative voice. Children and young people continue to disappear, but everybody ignores this. And children really suffer because of that. People, they don't have any freedom to go play or learn about the world or anything. Information about human slavery and sex trafficking is taboo. Nobody mentions it. Police become more militaristic in the cities that still have police. People are severely disappointed. Some states withdraw from the U.S. Union. People die in droves, partly from corona and partly from disillusionment. That's the end of the second scenario. Okay. Scenario 3. This was discouraging. Trump is about to return as president, and we just kept hearing, he's coming, he's coming, he's coming. He's about to be returned as president. There's a huge buildup of sentiment about his return. Election audits come out and say what we all think is true. Then whistleblowers start coming out with information that claims Trump is part of the deep state plan to introduce the New World Order. The financial system begins to stall out and a number of bubbles break. Like, uh-oh. The banking system then falls into disarray, and there are many closures. Many banks just close. And the exceptions to that were the ones that I saw right at the beginning of the look-see, which are not part of these scenarios. But the big banks that had gobbled up small banks, as the big banks are, some of them are really struggling or closing altogether. The smaller banks withdraw from the big banks and go back to being a small bank and doing things on their own. So that was like, oh, wow. Okay. Mainstream media goes into overdrive in their attempt to continue controlling the narrative and the people. And this is actually where I saw some mainstream media offices being attacked, which I didn't put in here. I saw it elsewhere. I think I actually saw that last month. Supply lines break down in terms of shipping, trains, and trucking. Fighting breaks out here and there. Gangs form. Social chaos. Just absolutely nothing working. People are in shock and paralyzed into inaction. People die by the thousands. Trump is assassinated. Military control. It's like, wow. Oh, yeah. So that was scenario number 3. And then scenario number 4, Trump does not return as president. Whistleblowers come out with a continuous stream of information about the corruption of Biden's administration. Former institutions of government close up or collapse into total ineffectiveness. Nothing gets done by anybody. Not the Congress, not the courts, not the institutions, nothing. The financial system stalls and then freezes and then begins to take money from the people in a bail-in process. That was not what I wanted to see. Mm-hmm. Supply lines break down in shipping, trains, and trucking. Trump works on the sidelines with 2 goals in mind. The first goal is to maintain military protection of U.S. soil to prevent attacks or takeover attempts. His second goal is to organize logistics for delivery of food, fuel, and other necessities. Local groups form everywhere, in order to organize and protect their area. Big box stores close in many places, and when that happens, nobody has access to anything because all the mom and pop stores are gone. Mm-hmm. People die by the thousands, again. Social, governmental, and financial collapse. The swamp ends up drained because it is the end of the U.S. government. Q is correct. The swamp has been drained, but the end is not for everyone. So of those 4 scenarios, when those were coming in and I was writing them down, I was like, oh, you know, I could see that the first one was the ideal. It was the thing everybody would love to see, but I didn't think it was realistic. The second scenario was more the same of what we have now. Nobody's happy, you know, nothing's really working the way it should. The third scenario was everything, you know, breaks down. But Trump is lost. Trump is gone, or is revealed as part of the deep state. And the fourth scenario is Trump is gone. The whole thing falls apart, and we just don't have a U.S. anymore. Mm-hmm. And that requires reorganizing, rethinking, regenerating ourselves, and then asking the really hard questions. Okay, now what?
Can I just ask you for precision before we continue here?
Yeah.
In number 4 at the end, you said the 17th letter are correct. The swamp is drained, but the end is not the same for everyone. What do you mean by that?
No,
Did I say that wrong?
From Q. Whoops. That's a quote from the 17th letter. The swamp has been drained, but the end is not for everyone. In other words, it's going to end up drained, but people are not going to they're not going to like the ending. Not everyone will like the ending.
Okay, I see. Okay, I see the meaning. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought it was alluding to some people being drained. Their ending would not be the same. Like someone.
No.
No, I understand that. Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Jenny is in the chat here. One of our moderators is saying to everyone, "Yeah, please be respectful here. You don't have to agree with what Penny's seeing."
Yeah.
what we're saying is these are 4 scenarios that came up in our look-sees. And so we're having a conversation about these 4 scenarios and perhaps where it ties in with some other data that we can plug through here, either from the mainstream news or from other seers or predictive linguistics. Sorry about that. Speaking of that, your scenario number 4 looks a lot like what Cliff High has been describing in his modeling for quite some time. He was talking about this devolution is the word that he was using, where the whole body underneath the body politic would just move and the politic would just fall underneath, and we'd have to start over and recreate everything. That sounds a lot like number 4 in there. There's no savior, outside savior in that particular scenario. Okay. Now,
let me just say something. I think as I look at them, and I've looked at these over and over again, I actually wanted number 4. I think number 3 is what's going to happen. And I think that the only difference is who takes the blame, Trump or Biden. They both involve the collapse of the U.S. or some serious interference with our system or some serious dysfunction, ineffectiveness with our entire governmental system. And I hate to say some of these things because people are just, they're at the edge of madness now with all the stuff happening. But I think it's really important for us to look ahead first and then be quiet. We're right at this point where we really need to be almost silent now and just watch things unfold. So
Cliff just put out a video today. It's woo time. And so, yes, he's talking about the big woo here just around the corner. And Cliff is going to be on our show on Saturday along with David Morgan. It's going to be the silver woo. So you guys don't want to miss that. It's going to be absolutely amazing. I think we're recording at 11 a.m. or noon. But anyways, I'll do a video so you guys know about that. Okay. Jenny here saying, just again, I'm picking on Jenny here. She says, yeah, number 4 seems realistic to me. Given the state of affairs now and what we're seeing, it ties into another conversation, Penny, that you and I had on our last look-see and a follow-up I did in my car maybe last week. And it had something to do with the effect that we can't fix the old. We're moving into this new era, and the old structures must, by design, crumble. They were born out of these old energies, and we need to build in the new energy, in the new era that we're going. So you and I had agreed on this, that waiting for Mr. B to leave, Mr. T to come back, blah, 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 as cool as that may be to contemplate, that's still just moving the chairs on the Titanic, right? We need to look at the bigger picture here. And I realized that for some of the audience members, this is not a pleasant conversation to them because it involves them maybe making more effort to be in control of their own future than letting somebody else do that for them. I understand that. It's difficult to come to that realization. What can we say to those people, Penny? Because again, this week it's been weird energies. We're getting weird emails. People are, and I think that's what Cliff is alluding to here. We as human, as a collective, we're feeling this. It's just around the corner, and we're expressing it in all of these weird ways because our bodies are trying to react to what's just around the corner. So what can you say to the audience here?
I think
we're trying to remove the fear out of the equation. That's what Penny and I are trying to do.
Don't be fearful. Take heart. I think what we're going to see is some other people's illusions being lost, meaning the people who thought they would be in control. That's not going to be real comfortable for them. And that's something that we can then say, okay, now that they're done or out of the way, or this is fixed, or that's resolved, or we finally figured out this is the truth about this or that, let's do this. And I think that's really important. I think it's really time for some inner silence because everybody's just and arguing, and really a lot of people are just so upset because they are afraid. Look that fear in the eye and just move on past it. we have options. We have a lot of options, and we have some really great people that are on the team of let's build a new world. Let's have a new attitude. Let's have a new whatever. There's no limits. We have all kinds of options. It's not something that we have been used to doing. And so people will have to get into a new routine in terms of thinking, in terms of acting. But I would say, what excites me? We have a chance to clean up the world. I think that people cannot be, you can't have any clarity if you're not healthy. And we have poisoned ourselves 6 ways to Sunday. Mm-hmm. It's in the air, it's in the water, it's in the food, it's in our thoughts, it's in everything. And that has to stop so that we can discover what it is to be healthy and how to have clarity again.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think for the audience, I'm just reading the comments here, and a lot of people are saying that yes, our words are important too. We create our reality, and we can't live in this hopium either. So I'm reading all the comments here, and I love that you guys are contributing with us here, because we're just trying to piece the bigger picture here so that we know where we truly are. And this is where Penny and I have often come together and express the same viewpoint, that we have been duped many times before. And I know some people in the audience don't like to admit that. I admit it. We've been duped many times. I've been duped many times before. These people are experts at duping us. And so every step of the way, even last year, I was having shows and I was questioning the 17th letter group. I was questioning Mr. T and all of these things. And it wasn't always popular to do so, but I'm like, hey, wait, it's not that I'm against rule of law. It's not that I'm against freedom. It's not no. I just want to make sure we're not being duped again. And there's not a bigger picture that I don't see. So it's, as a human trying to grow and trying to figure out, I want to ask these questions. And if you guys think that it's not correct to ask questions, then okay, you can go back to a limited hangout somewhere where people don't question your worldview, but then you might have the results out of that also that come with that. Here on this channel, I've always brought people who have different opposing views so that we can analyze them and have adult conversations and try to figure things out. And I think right now, as Cliff is saying, the woo is so effing thick that even the best of us are looking at this as like, okay, there's so much data coming in at us at a frantic speed, and this is where a lot, and this is what I was saying in my update video in the card the other day, we're all suffering from this weird fatigue of having to revisit every day. Oh my God, am I walking on a solid plank? I just put this plank down yesterday. I thought it was solid, and then it's not again. So I get it. It's difficult.
Maybe we're just walking the plank. Boom, good drop into the door.
Exactly. Those damn pirates, they're making us walk.
I know.
Well, let's speak about biases. I think for a lot of us, one of the things in the age of Aquarius that we're moving into, the age of knowledge, in order to be able to hold that knowledge, to understand it, to transmute it, we need to heal ourselves. You just talked about the body here, which is very important. And that's why I've been saying to the audience here, pay attention to your body in the last couple of months. We're going to be asked to hold much higher frequencies and much more energies, and your body needs to be up to par. So I'll just say that again for the audience. But on top of that, in being able to understand and to accumulate and to hold all of this knowledge that's also coming at us through these frequencies, we need to heal a big part of ourselves, and that's our biases. Our biases on one side or the other side, or what we think we have biases from. And a lot of times we don't even know that we're dealing with these programs that were set upon us through, our schooling, through our religion, through our whatever mainstream media. And we're at that point now where every day we're being faced with this new information, and it's the universe giving us the opportunity to look in the mirror and say, wait, why am I reacting to that? Is that because I have a bias? Then if so, is it truly in my best interest to hold this bias right now? That's where I think we need to have this conversation, Penny. And just for the audience too, I want to recommend, go check out the last interview that Penny had with Kim Gogan. They talked about this bias aspect, but let's get into that here a little bit, Penny, for the audience.
Yeah, I think I just want to share. You know, you don't think you have any biases. We don't think we do, but oh my Lord, we do. We're just a whole bunch of them. And I'm thinking about what's called cognitive what's it called? Dissonance, cognitive dissonance, that I experienced when I first said to myself, I think I need to look at this whole list of things, these questions that are not answered about Donald Trump. The list is getting longer and it's not looking good. And I think we're in the squeeze gates, like the cow that you put in the squeeze gate in order to give a vaccine so you don't get kicked. And so there was this whole almost a week of feeling jittery inside, feeling angry, feeling like I don't want to look at this. I want this to be this way. You know, I want what I want, kind of thing. And that then after a while, it was like, no, you know, it just kept coming up. No, you need to look at this. No. And so I think that's one of the processes that we go through when we have to face something that we just don't want to face. It's kind of like when you don't want to think your husband is cheating on you, or that your brother stole the family inheritance and cheated you out of something or whatever. It's a sickening feeling. And I think that that's one of the signals that we have to look at that says, you know, the sick thing is, what if that's the case? That's what causes us to feel like, oh, I just really don't feel good. I have a headache, or I got a stomachache. But biases are these programs that give us permission to go after what we want. In my classes, I don't really deal with biases until you get to intuition 6 and 7. But here's the rule of thumb for consciousness. You are not going to have any clarity if you haven't dealt with all of your biases. And that's a long process. I call it root work, ROOT, root work. I introduce it in the early stages of my intuition classes, and then we really focus on it when we get to 6 and 7. But you take an issue, something that you want and you're really upset about, and you have to ask yourself, you know, what is so important about that? Why do I think it has to be that way? And so then you have to take the devil's advocate position, in which you say, okay, what would it mean, or what would I have to do or think or feel in order to contemplate that this is the truth? And so and then you move to another position, and then another position. And it's really important to explore. Sometimes there's 9 or 10 different biases that we have around a single issue. Mm-hmm. And we want what we want because we want it. And we have the right to go after it, but you need to know what's driving you. Otherwise, you're going to get tripped up or be unprepared for all the issues that come up.
What or who's driving you? Who's driving the bus?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we can all have pretty dreams and beautiful illusions and you know, stories that we tell ourselves. But the bottom line is, you know, what do you believe you should be able to have? What do you believe the world should do or be? Those things are those are important questions. And of course, they make you uncomfortable. So, but you can't get to clarity until you get to those.
Yeah. And I think that's first of all, thank you, Penny, for this conversation. Thank you for having that last one with us. And I want to bring it up on the screen for the audience here who may not have seen it. But let me read 2 comments right now that are very pertinent. So first, Sandra, thank you so much. She says, I absolutely agree with you, JC. You're doing an amazing job with interviews. I learned so much on this channel. So thank you so much. I truly appreciate that. So thank you, Sandra, for that. And this one here, C.A. Sadori, thanks for bringing up the concerns about Mr. T, Penny. We have to look at things we don't want to face and how we aid and abet the narrative doesn't serve us. So that's a great point there too. So on that note, on those concerns, Penny and I did a whole show on this. And if you haven't seen it, we did a really good job trying to look at this from every perspective and to have an adult conversation about it without saying, hey, if you're questioning so-and-so, you're racist, or if you're questioning so-and-so, you're anti-constitutional. No. Let's just look at what we have in front of us and not be afraid to ask some of the questions where, just like with the COVID situation right now, my big frustration is with mainstream media and with people I meet on the street is I'm not allowed to ask questions. They're like, no, it's that way, JC. Don't ask questions and just shut up. I'm like, well, no, that's not who I am. I want to ask questions. So let me bring this link down for you guys. Please do go watch it if you haven't seen it, because it might, spark a conversation with yourself. And then once you had it with yourself, you might have it with other people. And if collectively we have these conversations, we're less likely to be duped. And I'm not saying necessarily we are 100% being duped, but I'm saying there is that possibility. I mentioned this in my last show, also with Janine, that it's still very possible we are being duped. Every time we have a big dupe, if you want to call it that, they crank up the volume so that the next one, we don't notice that we're in a dupe until it's too late. They've done this to us over and over and again. And again, if you're intellectually honest, you have to agree that that's truly what's been happening to us for a long time on this planet. So it's all about talking with each other, not calling us out and, ad hominem attacks and all this stuff. No, just having conversations and let everybody have their points of views and their opinions and to discuss them out loud. So thank you, C.S. Adori, for that comment also. Now, going back to this idea of biases, I love the way you framed it. And perhaps we can have another show on this, like a whole show on this, actually, how that ties in, not just with intuition, but with discernment. There is a disconnect there also between the intuition and the discernment for a lot of people, but they haven't made that bridge yet. Can you speak to that a little bit? Do you know where I'm going with this?
I'm not sure, but I have a response. So if it's not right, then you say more when I'm done. Okay, so discernment is the ability to notice everything about a situation, including all of the contradictions and all of the paradoxes, and to be aware of your biases and aware of what you want, and to be able to hold all that and observe until something moves and you have an indicator of where is the real energy going. So that's discernment from my point of view and in my experience. It's the ability to hold complexity or a paradox without glomming on to, or one of the complaints I have about a lot of stuff I read is people have lost. No, let me say it differently. People have become or have gotten caught in the habit of looking at somebody's looks, their personality, their money. It's all identity politics. Personality, Hollywood worship. There's no real discernment. What's really happening with this person? What are they doing? We don't dig deep. We just look at the surface, and that's a terrible mistake. So
that's very good. You're answering my question here too. And I've been spending a lot of time answering emails in the last month that speak to this. And now you've just put it in a different frame that's going to help me answer some of these emails.
Good.
A lot of people come to me and it's like, wait a second. Situation A, I thought was true. And now I'm realizing that situation B might be true. And they're having trouble consolidating. And sometimes I have to go back and say, yes, but pay attention here. Both might be true and both might be false at the same time.
That's
so that whole idea of what you just said, to being able to hold complexity and to hold these paradoxes in your mind until you can absorb and come to your conclusions, that's the key. And for a lot of people, as soon as they see that paradox, they either give up, it's too hard. They kind of go to sleep, right? Again, that cognitive dissonance, that heavy load that's on us right now. Or they get triggered by their bias to quickly get out of that paradox because it's uncomfortable to be in that paradox. So the bias comes in and chooses one for them because it makes sense to them.
That's exactly what happens. Yeah.
Okay. That's what we're trying to encourage people to step back from and hold that paradox maybe a little bit longer and stay in that uncomfortable zone, maybe a little bit longer, where both scenarios can be true and false simultaneously. And again, we deal with timelines here, and people, somebody was just asking, hey, ask opinion about the timelines. Are we in the 11th or 12th timeline? Do you want to speak to the timelines here too, and how we're being affected on an even higher arc level through time here?
Okay, so I have a different view of timelines altogether. All the timelines are, when somebody braids their hair, it's like all the time. That's what timelines are. They're all braided kind of together. And you can move from one to another just using the decisions that you make. A timeline is a whole series of decision points. That's all it is. And if all your decisions are pointed in, I want this to happen, then that's probably going to happen for good or for ill. If you want something different to happen, or you don't know what is, what you want, a lot of people don't. And they say, I don't know. I know what I want. And I'm very clear about that. And I make decisions accordingly. And I'm old enough where it's like, I've been around the block once or twice. And it's kind of hard to fool me. I mean, I did get fooled a number of times growing up, and those teach you. And you lose money, you lose face, you lose time, you lose your work, you lose possibilities, you lose jobs.
Heartbreak.
You lose somebody you love. And that's just the way life is. So timeline, if you want to change timelines, change the series of decisions that you're making and know exactly where you're going. If you are a Tesla, for instance, and you have this brilliance in terms of being able to manage electricity and fields and electromagnetism, but you don't see the big picture arrayed against you in terms of JP Morgan and that whole group that was pulling strings in the background to collapse your work, then you're not going anywhere. You're going to die a pauper, or you're going to die frustrated, etc. You can't be too one-sided. You have to be more complex. And we aren't raised that way. We need to start raising our children that way, to just observe, what do you think? What do you think today? What do you see today? What do you think is going to happen next week? What do you, okay, it's next week. Well, last week you said this. What do you think now that this is happening instead? Why are we doing that? Why do we make people make a choice and then stick to it come hell or high water? Because you said, that's what people say. Well, you said, well, you promised. People accuse others of making promises when they didn't make any promise at all. They just opened their mouth and said, well, this is what I'm thinking right now. And they're just thinking out loud. So we have to be different with one another. We have to learn to listen. Bottom line.
That, and I love what you just said here too about the complexity, because whether you're a remote viewer, a tarot card reader, somebody who does predictive linguistics, it's a moving target. And people get stuck in, oh, I heard something that Cliff said, and okay, that's it, that's the Bible. I heard Penny said this, okay, that's the Bible. And then we move down the line 6 months, timelines changes, consciousness raises, we change our ability to create the situation because we've had more information maybe front loading us. And so things changes, and suddenly they come back and they're angry. Well, that didn't happen like you said, or like you promised. Right. Like you said, well, first of all, nobody's promising. They're sharing with you the data points that they're getting at that time. And so let's speak about that also. We're in this period of time now. Again, this whole idea of having to
hang on, JC, let me interrupt. I see the question, different timelines. Apparently there are 11 or 12. My view of timelines is that there are as many timelines as there are people on the planet. It's a collective reality system. And all the timelines weave together, braid together, and you have some outliers and some that, hairs that stick out of the braid. that's just an analogy for, there aren't 11 or 12 timelines. There are certain surges of energy that carry the whole group forward, and others that go in a different direction. So timelines is useful. It's a useful concept, but I think we need to be much more sophisticated about it. When you get the majority going one direction, then that's where the reality is going.
Well, let's speak exactly about that. In your video entitled "We've Been Conned," in that video, you talked about how consciousness or the cohesiveness of our consciousness has to come to a certain level now where we're all on the same page, all deciding as humans where we want to go, as opposed to looking at these individuals trying to fix the old system. We need to strive for that moment where we hit that critical mass and we understand, okay, this far, no further, and this is what we want to create. Once we achieve that, whatever you want to call it, a singularity movement, it's game over, really, for the people who are trying to oppose that and that freedom for humanity. Speak to that a little bit here for this audience.
I think you probably said it all right there. Once we come together and decide this is what we're doing and this is what we're not doing, then it's over for, whatever our choice is. If we decide we're, moving forward and we're creating our own reality system and we're having a different form of governance, and we're having different food system, different medical, we're having our version of freedom and not the people up at the top. We have to get past the idea that kings and presidents and prime ministers are necessary to run our lives. We took that step when we came to America and said, we're done with that craziness in Europe. We're going to America where we have some peace and quiet and freedom, and we can do whatever the heck we want. And that's how America got started. And then along comes, we were still under the king, but he was far enough away and we didn't have internet that it didn't matter. We could just, until he started demanding taxes. Mm-hmm. And that really brought the whole relationship with kings to an end. But then we set up a president and we did our best to put some checks and balances in there. But if you look at what we've got right now, that presidency isn't working. That court system isn't working. That Congress isn't working. Nothing's working. Mm-hmm. What are we going to do? How are we? That just makes me cry. I grew up in that system. It's really, it was a fine system while it worked. It quit working probably 50 years ago.
I would suggest that it was a fine system to give the illusion of freedom and to open doors to eroding that freedom in a slow enough fashion that people wouldn't realize.
That's exactly right.
Okay, you and I talked about this in this episode, ETs and Human Trafficking.
Yeah.
If you guys want to go see that, that's still on our pay-per-view. We couldn't put it anywhere else because of the language and the content in there. But let's talk about exactly that. The system was designed in such a way to keep us slave, but to have us believe that we were free-range slaves, maybe at best, right? And so now what's happening is the people who design these systems are perhaps, and this is what you were saying in this episode, have decided that humanity is rebelling enough that their plans to harvest this planet has already failed. When they look into their future timelines, they've realized that and perhaps now have moved on. And when you said that to me in this episode, it made me think, and I keep going back to this episode and I pointed to the audience because scenario number 4 in your look-see now makes a lot more sense when you think that the overarching controllers, architects of this harvest have now decided to leave. Now we're seeing the minions fight with each other, which don't have that same, 1,000-year plan in front of them and the capacity to hold this very complex system into place. And this is perhaps why we need to see, like what Clefai is saying, the devolution of all of these systems so that we can build the new. But that means that a lot of us who thought maybe we were close to retirement have a lot of work for maybe a number of years here to bring all of this back into a reality that works for us and not for the bug or whoever the bug was. Do you want to speak to that a little bit here? And again, watching some of our language, not to get booted off here.
Yeah. I think that, let me just back up what you said. I've gotten messages directly from my own people, that said, okay, keep going. The people who were planning the takeover have given up. And what you're going to see are the 40 or 50 layers of business and banking and corporation structures and, governance that were put in place to be able to say at the end, look at those fools, they did it to themselves. It looks like the people, us, are really being mistreated, maltreated by our own people. But I have to say, no, I shouldn't say that. It's just going to upset people. I'm not going to do that. So I'm just going to leave it at, when you come to a point where a takeover plan comes to an end, then Cliffy is absolutely right. Devolution is on the table from that point forward. And there's no way around it unless we cave and hand over our power to the human beings who think they're going to step in and take the place of the people who are running it up at the top.
And that's exactly where we're at now. And yes. This is why so much is being thrown at us to make us tired, to make us worry, to make us fearful, so that we just say, oh my God, it's too complicated. We can't do this. We're just babies. Let's give it to this guy. He looks good.
Yeah.
This girl, whoever, right? I know. Wow. You God just forbid. Said it. And this is so crucial that we have this conversation. Yeah. I love it. Thank you again. C. Molvena is asking, question for Penny. What would world devolution look like? How does it differ from communism? Serious question, by the way. I'm just curious. Thanks. That's a great question, actually. Let's get into that.
That's a good question. I want to make a comment about communism. Communism is something that is, this is my experience now. This is maybe not official teaching in terms of governance, but communism is always introduced as a concept on those planets where there's a takeover effort going on, because it sucks all of the power from all the people and just gives it to the people up at the top. It's a disaster for consciousness because under communism, you don't own anything, you can't decide anything, you never have any power, everything is decided for you. And so the natural evolution of the human being is destroyed, of the consciousness of the human being. So communism, along with the word corporate, along with religion, along with money and banking systems, those are the tools used to take over a planet. Now, if a planet wants to utilize those things on their own, they don't work very well for very long. And people usually figure that out. But when you have a takeover effort going on, then what you have is all these layers built in so that we can't see what's really happening. So that's my comment about communism. What was the rest of that sentence? Or the rest of that question before we got to Astro?
Hold on, I was on mute. Yes, the question was, how does devolution look like? What does that world look like? That's what
okay. So when I can only say what I saw with the little man in brown robes back in 79, 80, 81, and through there, devolution looks like the country gets into some really serious, I'm going to say it this way. Nobody believes in the old governance. Everybody sees the corruption. And the result is that people begin to ignore. They begin to ignore everything coming down from the government. They begin to ignore all the rules. It starts out kind of, like where we're at now. It can go into full-blown anarchy.
I was going to say, we're there now. That has already started. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what I saw in the U.S., and not just the U.S., but in Europe, was that England pulled out of the what do you call it, the EU, and the Northwest states, Washington and Oregon, pulled out of the U.S. government, and then California, and then Texas, and some people across the South. And then, I mean, it just one state or group of states after the next said we're out of the union. Then the whole thing just came apart. It was quite chaotic for a while. People were on their own. Nobody was taking responsibility for anything. And that is one thing that the robes talked about again and again. You have to have personal responsibility if you're going to have any kind of reasonable and honorable government with integrity. And so little by little, people withdrew from the union. The government collapsed. It tried to restart more than once. It tried to restart, and each time it got smaller and smaller until nobody was paying attention at all. And it just kind of passed away with the last of the old presidents and the old congressmen and et cetera.
For the person asking the question too, I was trying to scan Cliff High's BitChute there, because just go watch maybe the last 3 or 4 videos. He talks about this devolution here quite a few times, and including in his interview with Greg Hunter, I believe. So, and he explains in more detail what that looks like. But he also says, and here's maybe a silver lining in there, he's saying that this devolution is being planned by the good guys. We have people who know this is coming, who've been working on this, who've been working in the shadows. And this is something where all of us out here, maybe the rebels, somebody mentioned the rebel gene, and I want to bring that up here in a second, like Carrie Cassidy's book. But us, the rebels here, we didn't know that we were working and that there was another force behind us working also at this that perhaps should be out in the open now. And this is what Cliff is saying. It's about to come out in the open, that we all realized what's happening now, and that people have been working on this, and that we can unify as humans where we want and how we want to deal with this devolution, and rather the creation that comes after this devolution. So in all of this, like Cliff is saying in his videos, I agree, and I think Penny agrees too. We're cautiously optimistic here. We have a chance to do something we haven't been able to do for thousands of years. So when I see people in the comment, "Oh, Penny's just doom and gloom," actually, no, you're not paying attention to what we're doing.
No.
We're making a beautiful omelet here, but we might have to break a few eggs. Yes, okay, I understand. So let's go back to this rebel gene. Penny, you and I had this interview with Carrie Cassidy at some point, and this is her book here. I interviewed her on this book. Let's talk about why perhaps we are optimistic again. And it has to do with this rebel gene of who we actually are, and the fact that we've forgotten who we are. And this, again, is an opportunity for us to remember the power that we actually have. So big credit here to Carrie Cassidy. So let's get into that positive thing here. And again, I want to bring that piece in, and I think it's important for people to not be so overwhelmed that they say, "Oh, this is too complicated. I'm just going to give it to Joe Blow again so that they can rule and make things easy for me." No, we can do this, guys. We totally can do this. We've been brainwashed to think we can't, and that we're young and stupid and idiots, and that we need a nanny state. We've been brainwashed to that, and we've been fed crap so that our bodies believe that. But it's just not the case. Penny, the mic is yours.
I have to agree. We can do this, and we will do this because we have to. We don't really have a whole lot of choice. Well, we do have a choice. We could choose to live under totalitarianism, or we could choose to be free. So I didn't read Carrie's book. I have heard good things about it, though, and I have my own experiences with the robes in which we went to look at the future. Oh my gosh. Stunning kinds of future. People were working together. People were excited. There was new money. There was new food systems. There was new medical systems. There was new technology. There were new forms of housing. There were new groupings of people. There were new forms of governance, new forms of retail. All of that was so, I got to see people excited about creating we could create this. And some of that early creation became really very sophisticated because people with more, I'm going to say more engineering expertise would get on board and say, hey, I think I can make that easier if we did this or if we did that. And there was just, by the time, what is this? This is 2021. By the time I got to 2050, actually into 2040, everything was vastly different. So one of the things that I noticed was how well people got along, and we didn't have school systems. People had learned how to take care of children. They actually began to like children. Right now, I don't think people like children. I'm like, what is the matter with you? Children are amazing. Little bundles of energy with ideas and new perspectives and trying to figure out the world. And so all of that we're headed toward that. And it's a time when I think if I can say the big turning point is when everybody realizes, wow, we're all working together. Everybody a few people fall through the cracks, but not very many. Mm-hmm. Everybody's working to make sure that everybody in their area, in their neighborhood, in their town, a lot of the cities are pretty empty, but the people that actually don't get sick and that are able to work and do, keep things rolling, there's just an explosion of creativity and this wonderful, and it's not all, there's some things where people argue or are disgusted over one thing or another.
We are human after all.
Yeah, exactly. But the explosion of creativity and, hey, I heard you were trying to do this. Did you know about that? And here's some info, and just an amazing kind of cooperation that's going on.
And that's the thing. All of what you've just described does not and cannot happen under the old systems. The old systems was designed to stifle that creativity, that spark of human, and that rebel gene. It was designed to put us into systems and these boxes and in these smaller boxes and smaller boxes, which we find ourselves in now. And so we have to mourn. And this is the part where a lot of us on the show are having these conversations. We have to mourn the fact that those boxes are gone, or they're going, and they have to go. You and I have been saying this for over a year now. The first time you were on my show was a year and a half ago. We said to the audience, the tighter you hold onto the future, the more difficult it will be for you to move into this new creative, positive timeline that we all want to. And it's that understanding that these old structures need to go. And some of these characters are only characters in this big play to make us realize that those structures need to go and that we have power. Somebody just said in the chat, oh, good, there's a plan. Phew. I forget who that was. But yes, but you have to do your work. I have to do mine, and Penny has to do hers. Yeah. It's not about just giving it to the guy with the plan and saying, okay, we're good for another 1,000 years. No. We've been there, done that quite a few times already. We've been around that merry-go-round here on the planet, and now is the time to change that. And I'm excited. Billy says, this is great. Yes, this is a quote from Clefai in one of his last videos. He says, Clefai explained it well. It will be a struggle, yes, but life will get better. Quote, it was the worst of times, it was the best of times.
Amen. Amen.
Who said we're all doom and gloom? Come on, guys.
Right. Yeah, and I think until we get past the, I'm not sure what to call it, until we get over the hump, which the hump is September 15th to about October 15th. So we're headed over the hump right now. And the hump is disappointment. It's disillusionment. Until we get over that hump, I don't think it really even makes a whole lot of sense, because timing is important to be introducing some of the things that I know are in the works that are fabulous. That are, just take heart, you guys.
There's a lot, Okay, so I totally agree with you with that too, because for the last 10 years of me and universe conspiring to bring me to have this show, right? So we've all
There you
been in
go.
these paths and been like moved around. I've understood that where we're going is absolutely magnificent, but
Yes.
we are going through this difficult period. Sue is asking on the screen. Oh, first of all, before that, Sue, somebody else just said, "Hey, JC, you said past or future." Okay, let me just repeat that. The tighter you hold on to the past, the more difficult it will be for you to move into this new future positive timeline.
I
So
knew
if
it.
I misspoke that, I'm sorry. Lost in translation. It's late. Okay. It's my third show today. Okay. Sue says, JC, okay, so let's ask Penny. Any idea when this period of time will be completed? So let's talk about this hump that you just talked about, and then maybe forecast for us the next year or two. And then I'll bring in some of Cliff data, because he's also very tracking with what you're saying now.
Okay. So the hump is we're headed over the hump right now from now until about the middle of October. And unfortunately, Mercury retrograde is occurring at the same time. And Mercury retrograde is all about justice and balance and legal systems and beauty and truth. And so Mercury is going to, I think, put us through the ringer in terms of realizing that maybe some of the things we believed are not at all true. And that so then what I see after October 15th to say December 15th is this tremendous period of depression, sorrow, like loss of hope, belief, everybody's recognizing that it's over. It's over. The U.S., the old U.S. is over. Now the new U.S. is just being born. And I wouldn't even call it, well, it is the U.S., but it's a group of united regions and assemblies and councils, as opposed to just the United States of America. So, wow.
Right? So this is the remote viewing target from Dick Algeier at cryptoviewing.com is their website. You can find him on Patreon. I had him on the show here just last week with our series, The Death of the Petrodollar. Yeah. And what he's explaining here is exactly what Penny just said now, that realization that it's over. A transfer of power for the last time, right? Sense of adjourning, the mourning, the puking, the crying, the hunchback congressman in shock, disbelief. It was over. So that's the period of time that apparently they had remote viewed a year ago when they were tasked with the death of the dollar. Now, this coincides with everything else that's happening now, the devolution, the loss of confidence in all of our structures, which again are all steps for us in order to come together as humanity to decide what new structures we want to bring together. So we have to go through this part together. And I keep repeating this on my show, dude, compassion for everybody else watching the show, compassion for your brothers and sisters, your neighbors who don't get that yet, who are still maybe very afraid of all of these big changes that are happening quick, because for a lot of them, they're going to have to swallow this red pill in 2-3 months. Whereas Penny, you and many people watching this show swallowed this pill for 20 years. We had time to digest it.
Yes.
The new people coming on now, they don't have time to digest it. So again, you guys are watching these shows, you've done the homework, you've listened to these interviews, you've read the books and all that. You need to have compassion for these people here who are, and for yourselves too. I'm not saying it's going to be easy for you also. It's going to be hard for all of us to go through the mourning of those systems that we thought were part of our world, of our creations, and to realization that it was not. They were part of our enslavement is what they were. And so we have to go through this step. Okay, what's his name? I just saw a good question here. I think it was Jay, crypto-minded. It might have come just off my buffer. But he says, why is silver crashing? Okay, so Penny, Cliff High, they've both seen the silver go to 400 to 700 and then, maybe track back down a little bit and then way, way, way higher and then perhaps even surpass gold. Let's get into that question here. As we're getting into this death of the petrodollar event that we've just seen happen with Russia signing this deal with Saudi Arabia, supplanting the deal that Nixon had made in 71 when he took us off the gold standard. What do you see now, very shortly here, in terms of silver finally being let loose from its shackles? Did that pop up anywhere in your 4 scenarios other than number 3? I think you said the go back. Which one was number? No, right. Number 2. I think you had go back. Number 2, you had the go back currency. Where do you see silver happening in any of these scenarios here moving forward? A lot of people are interested in that.
The silver thing. I didn't have it in the scenarios, but I was just thinking about that today because I was having a conversation with somebody, and we were talking about the sense of the mortgages having difficulty, and then I listened to Bix, and I thought Bix is right. Bix Weir was talking about the destruction of Evergrande, a big mortgage-backed Ponzi scheme that has mortgages in China, lots of mortgage. Like, I forget what he said. The layman problem was however many billion it was, maybe 3 billion or something like that. This mortgage-backed crisis in China, which is going to affect the whole world, is 300 billion. 300 billion. It's like, and I'm listening to that, and I didn't really get to listen to all of it, but there was this sense of he's right, oh dear, and that's going to send, when the next money crisis comes, that's when silver and crypto start going up, and gold for that matter, and there's some fluctuation there. One of the things that I've seen that I'm not sure I like, cryptos go up. Let me say it like this: the banking system comes apart. Okay, it mostly closes, and there's a lot of bank holidays, and then we have some banks that pull out of the big bank system and they go their own way. These are small banks, they were small local or regional banks, but they pull out of the big bank system, and they go along with the new banking rules, and that undermines some of the crypto markets. People hurry to put their money in these smaller local banks, but there aren't enough of them. And so the silver ends up going up. Just today, I was like, oh man, I see it at, I don't even want to say, but it was close to 2,000. So, and that was January, February. Maybe that's not going to happen. I don't even like to say those kinds of things because that's so outrageous. But it becomes money for a short time, and then it kind of goes into just kind of a gentle slowdown, and the financial, we have new financial systems that are being, I'm going to say, set up everywhere. And I don't know anything about setting up financial systems, so I was looking at that over the first part of next year and into next summer, thinking, who, not me, has the balls to set up a new bank. So, and these new banks are different. They're service oriented. They're not control oriented. And so they can't take your money, and it isn't about fractional reserve. They have to leave your money alone when you put it in the bank. They have to leave it there. So there's different banks. They all have different rules. People are scrambling. People are using crypto. People are using silver. And people are still using dollars in like local ways and among family and friends and stuff. But Cliffy had said something that I had also said, which was it's like musical chairs. Nobody wants to be holding the bag of dollars when the music stops.
Well, let me bring that up to you. There's a question from Sue on the screen. She says, "GC, should we pull out all of our fiat from the banks?" Well, first of all, congratulations. You're calling it fiat and not money. So that's number one. Go check, if you haven't seen it, Sue, and anybody else in the audience here who's questioning this, go check out this last featured series on our channel. It's called Death of the Petrodollar. There's 7 or 8 of these episodes here. All amazing people, including Dick Allgaier, Bill Holter. But this interview here with Rob Kirby, he was explaining that everybody around the world has already de-dollarized. So if you're still holding dollars, you're the last one. And you're standing around and the music's about to end here. This is the event that's already occurred. We just haven't been told yet officially what's occurred. You're waiting for the music to finish to sit on your chair, but there's no more chairs. So
that's right.
If that answers your question, Sue, I'll put it that way. Of course, I can't give financial advice, but Rob Kirby was pretty bang on there. Now let's go back. So there's another question here. Alyssa said, did Penny just say $2,000 silver? Yes, she did. And that also
wasn't quite 2. It wasn't quite 2, but it was almost 18. So, yeah.
Well, that also lines up with Cliff. So Cliff had this $600 silver for the longest time. I believe it started popping up in his radar maybe 10 years.
I kept seeing that too.
Yeah. So, yes. Okay, so let me backtrack for the audience here who maybe don't know what we're talking about. So in the predictive linguistic models, Cliff was picking up this $600 silver, and this has been in the data for a few years now. And the way this data works also is that when you're late on this and the data keeps accumulating in the same fashion, there is more and more probability that scenario will come true. And this is the case here with the $600 silver. It keeps coming up in the data, and it keeps reinforcing those earlier models that were brought out years ago. Now, in that particular data set, in that same year, Cliff had predicted $64,000 Bitcoin that would retrench by about half. This has already occurred this year. And at that time, when he said, Bitcoin's going to go to 64,000, many in the audience said, he's off his rocker, poor old guy. It's never going to hit 64. But of course, it happened exactly on the dot. Now, everything else in those data sets talked about what we're seeing now. The sun disease, to put it that way, the banking system, the petrodollar degradation, the devolution, the food riots, all of these things, the riots, like we're seeing all of this now in our sphere. And in that data, basically it said we would see the $600 silver before Christmas in that same year where Bitcoin hit 64,000. So we're in this year now, folks. Now, on top of that, we've just seen these cataclysmic events here in the financial system, which again, the mainstream media doesn't want to tell you about. They didn't connect the dots. They just said, Russia signed a deal with Saudi Arabia, blah, 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 nothing to see here. Gold or pet rocks, go away, right? But at the same time, everybody who is really paying attention to this are buying physical silver like never before. I have Andy Sheckman on the screen every week, and he's saying, JC, I used to see a handful of 7-figure orders in a year. I usually see that. Now we're seeing that every week. So there's something happening. People are pulling the physical silver off of the market. Now, we saw the banks do this front running over the last year, but now we're seeing to the mom and pop level, people were buying physical silver here because they're understanding that this musical, what's it called? Musical chairs?
Musical chairs.
Almost over, as Rob Kirby was saying. So, man, that $2,000 silver is a hell of a cry for where it is now at $28 or whatever it is American.
26. I think it's 26.
I actually went down to 23 something, I believe, today.
Okay.
So, folks, let me bring this up. Andy will be back on tomorrow. This is the new special for the silver harmonics, the 1 ounce Britannias, and so the Philharmonics. Sorry, at $365 over spot. A really hard deal to beat there. So, if you guys are interested in getting physical silver, please do contact Andy here through our booking form. These are the discounts for the Beyond Mystic audience. I just put the link down there. That's beyondmystic.net/silver. Now, after that 2000, Cliff also talked about, again here, I'm repeating things. So if you guys already heard this, I apologize, but there's a lot of new people who just tuned into this, and they're just realizing that they're in a Ponzi scheme, and all those Ponzi's are about to end very quickly. And so they might not have heard this information. So please bear with me. What Cliff was also saying was that, first of all, that $600 silver is not the end game. that's just the shot across the bar to let you know that the old game is over. So
That's right.
words to that effect. And then we get into these couple of thousands, like you were saying, probably by spring of next year. And then parity with gold or surpassing gold.
Right.
So for people, they're like, whoa. Well, how much is gold going to be? So let's backtrack to Jim Sinclair, Mr. Gold himself.
Yeah.
He was famous for predicting the gold prices back in the 70s and 80s. And his current prediction, based on the amount of paper that they've admitted to printing this year, is already at $97,000 per ounce for gold. So that's what Jim Sinclair is saying. So could you imagine parity? And people are complaining for $3 or $4 over a spot, $23 for silver. I think you're good. So where do you want to keep your money right now? In paper? We can get into crypto. This could be a no whole other show. Joe will be on Friday night. We'll get into the crypto with him if you want for the Wacky Woo episode. But let's maybe finish on that note with silver. Yeah. When you look at people right now holding silver, Penny, how do you characterize these people? Are they part of a bigger collective? It's not all about Lambos and, whatever. It's about creating the new earth. What's the role of silver there and the silver holders? How do you see that? What's that psychic connection maybe?
I hadn't really thought about that, but I had the perception a couple of times over the last couple of years that the people who aren't certain are just buying silver as kind of an insurance policy sort of thing, and that later they would be really, really glad they did. And so it's a lot of people, there's a lot of people who are going to get caught with their pants down in terms of the financial system, because they're just not paying attention, or they just think that could never happen here. And some of it might be redeemable. Some, what we have is places where things get brought into a new system very quickly, and other places where they're just all about anger and complaining and no action, no constructive action. So it's really going to depend on each individual. The people who have silver will have something that is amazingly resilient. So I have encouraged even my kids, buy silver, buy silver.
Me too. All my daughters have silver. I started them very young. They were buying the Disney collections. I know it's Disney.
There you go.
Anyways, it was something to encourage them to buy silver at the time. So anyways, Dave on the screen is saying, Cliff said at these prices, they're paying you to buy silver right now. He said something else. He said their criminality right now, in terms of suppressing the price, is also an opportunity for you to buy at prices that are so way below what it's actually worth. Mike C is correcting me. Thank you, Mike. He says, Jim Sinclair said 87,097. Okay. I'll take the 87,000 gold and perhaps silver at parity. I'll be more than happy, sir, but thank you for correcting me.
I can handle it. I can live with that.
I can handle 87. It's okay, actually.
Yeah.
Really good. I could do 78, actually. I'd be happy.
I know.
So, folks, again, beyondmystic.net/silver. There you can find the coupon code for you guys if you're looking for silver. Now's the time. And of course, these Philharmonics are really cheap. So please get your hands on them if you can. All right. We're an hour 17 into this. Is there anything else tonight you wanted to share with the audience, either in terms of the look-sees or perhaps maybe advice here moving into this weird period of time here between the 15th and then this retrograde? Where do you want to end this with the audience here for tonight?
I think probably the thing that I would say would be to use this, couple things. Use this time over the next few months to examine yourself in retrospect, with the idea that you're asking, well, what were my biases? Because I think there's going to be ample time for that kind of self-examination. And hindsight is so nicely clear. It really allows us to see, the other thing I would say is that it's really important to be ready for some disillusionment and some disappointment at a lot of levels, a lot of levels. Whistleblowers, I have seen whistleblowers coming out of almost out of the walls, telling information and stuff. I think we're in for a huge disillusionment. Don't feel too bad about that. I mean, when I run into something at that level, it's like, oh, but you just have to be humble. Okay. We don't know everything. We did our best. We've done our best to listen, to believe in what we thought was right. When that turns out, or if that turns out to be incorrect or wrong, or we were hoodwinked or whatever, then look at that and go, oh, wow, learn from that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's an important thing.
That's great advice. Well, thank you, Penny, again. These are amazing conversations. They're hard to have, and I get it for the audience too. But so far, judging from the screen here, like, wow, like the 5-star program. Thank you, Sue. That's a great comment here. I'll bring that up on the screen. Thank you so much, guys, for contributing to the conversation here tonight. Thank you so much, Penny. Penny, how can we support you right now? What can we find for the audience here who want to get into maybe more of their own personal development work in terms of consciousness and maybe intuition? I know a lot of your classes are already booked, but what can they find here on Patreon to help them get started?
Well, there's a couple things that are coming up, which I think I mentioned last time. We're about to start a series on what the new world, what the revival of us will look like in a lot of different sectors, 12 different sectors. So that's coming up. We also have conversations about consciousness. But you know what would really, I would love to see? Hands down, don't bash one another. Don't criticize one another. Don't jump down somebody's throat because they have a different opinion. Just listen. And ask, now, why would they think that? Why would they, where's that coming from? Just don't hurt one another, okay? I would love that. That's payment enough. Whoop, I can't hear you. You disappeared.
Oh, hold on a second. There you go. I'm back.
Okay.
No, there was a little bit of echo. I keep muting and forgetting myself. Somebody was asking you earlier in the chat, again, new people coming on the screen, they didn't know about this book, The Robes. And this is perhaps where they need to start here. You have a big collection, including the consciousness stuff. But explain to the audience maybe what's in this book and perhaps how they can encourage you also by purchasing this. But getting into this data here of what was forecasted by the little men in brown robes.
Okay, so everything that's happening right now is stuff that I was shown back in 1980. And I wrote it down. This group of little men in brown robes started appearing in my kitchen. I know that sounds outlandish, but they kept coming around for about 1.5 years, and they wanted to show me pictures. And the pictures were about what was going to happen in the world. And their big thing that they kept coming back to was, look, you guys need to take responsibility for what you're creating because you are creating it. You create your future. Now, at the time, I wasn't really ready to hear that, and I didn't believe that for even a minute. But over time and, the learning and the research I've done over the last 40 years, it's like, yep, we are. That's us. This situation is the situation that we have created in order to be able to take a huge leap in consciousness, wisdom, grace, power, and ability to create in a way that serves a whole different agenda, our continued evolution into power, and to be able to get a seat at the table of the other people in the solar system. There's other groups of people that meet and talk, that maintain peace. And I think that that's long term. I mean, that's where we're going. And that's what I think is really worth it.
And I think we kind of touched upon this earlier today. We have to have this bigger conversation of the overarching not just who left and who was doing things to us, but perhaps who was also there, our family, our cousins or brothers and sisters from space. This is a whole other conversation. So perhaps the next time you come around here, we'll dive into that a little bit more too, because we need to open our consciousness and our ability to look at that bigger picture as well. So who we are, we have to understand that we're not alone here. And this is also a big part of the equation here that's still being obfuscated for the most part here from our field of view. And this is an important conversation. I totally agree.
Yeah, let me add one thing to that too. I think people need to understand that in the background, there are amazing people doing extraordinary things to hold a space for us to move into. And I think that that's really comforting. You should know that, and there's more than one. And they are working their their tush off, their buns off, in order to be able to hold that space for us until we do step into it. So amazing array of people and beings. So yeah, let's have this conversation next time.
Okay, very good. And I wanted to say this also. I think Daphne had mentioned this earlier. Folks, please do sign up for the newsletter here. Talk about your last newsletter and what they can expect here by signing up, Penny. And let me bring
the newsletters are really simple. They're short. They don't come out very often. But a lot of people try to get into my classes, and they're almost always sold out sometimes within 24 hours. And so the newsletter gives you advance notice of this is when it's opening. And then little updates, what's happening, stuff like that, simple stuff. It's not very long. So I don't like a lot of clutter in my email inbox, and I don't like to clutter up other people's.
Very, very good. We all appreciate that. So thank you so much, Penny. So folks, you can find Penny Kelly at pennykelly.com or consciousnessonfire.com. You can find her, and please do go and subscribe to her YouTube channel here at Penny Kelly. And you can also find these teas in consciousness and a lot more here. We didn't get into all of this, but there's a lot of great packages for you to choose from here at patreon.com/Penny Kelly. So this was A Break in the Cloud, and I want to encourage you to join me tomorrow night for the Wacky Woo with Mr. Jason IV. We'll get into some spirituality, some crypto, of course, and some weird shit going around the world right now. We're going to have an amazing conversation. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. And merci beaucoup, Penny. Always enjoyed these conversations. I love you from the bottom of my heart. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you. Ditto to everyone.